This is Allison Brunelli, Associate Trainer for Art2Ride at the foundation level with a full training session. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. Once again, showing a full training session. This is my lunge session. Contigo has kissing spine, arthritis in the lower neck, predominantly on the right side, 2 former right hind suspensory injuries, a severe former injury of the right-sided sinus, and a medially rotated left foreleg. Contigo is 18 years old and had been held in a force frame for about 11 years of his life. On this particular day, in this particular lunge session, I did like how nice and fluid and swingy Contigo's walk was. My goal was just to keep encouraging him to be willing to actively step forward and underneath his body, pushing his haunches away from me as best I could without creating a negative response on his part. He is a very sensitive horse. By sensitive horse, what I mean by that is that he tends to have a knee-jerk reaction to the aids. Not so much in work in hand, but more so in the lunge work and in the mounted sessions. This is very stereotypical of Contigo, what you're about to see for the next few minutes. He has to go to the bathroom. It's almost every morning. He will stop 2, 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5 times. And he's sort of just all sort of tightened up and can't really work until he goes to the bathroom. So I'm just going to lightly talk my way through this, and as we wait this out with Contigo. But I figured I'd just show the video as is and let you see what I deal with in the mornings. It's neither here nor there that he has to go to the bathroom. I just have to be patient with him. And sometimes it's just gas, and sometimes he does actually go to the bathroom. So I just have to wait it out. You know, I always get to the barn really, really early. I get to the barn sometimes at 6:30 in the morning, and I've got him in the arena to do a little work in hand by about 7:15 or so. And so the fact is he's basically just coming off of about half or 3/4 of his breakfast, and I have a feeling that's why he has to go to the bathroom and why he has to stop to relieve himself. What I don't want is for him to think that this is a way for him to get out of work. So I am sort of encouraging him on, and I do feel like this helps him actually get to the point where he does relieve himself if I do encourage him on. I'm not asking him to work. I'm just asking him to move forward. If there's a moment where I think he's actually going to go to the bathroom, then I actually let him stop and try to go to the bathroom. But as soon as he does relieve himself, then we do get to work. In the lunge work, Contigo starts out a little different every day. On this particular day, he was pretty willing to start to stretch and elongate his neck. I just prompted him to continue to seek a forwardness with his hind legs without rushing him. I'm also asking him to swing his haunches out a little, and I'm trying to actually bring his nose in just a smidge. All of this has to be done very diplomatically with Contigo so that he doesn't take offense to it. He's a very, very sensitive horse, as I've mentioned before. Maintaining contact to his mouth is an important part of my lunge sessions with him. In the past, I did not have consistent contact, and he took advantage of that. He's learned now that I will always be there with my contact, whether he raises his pole or if he drops it. Of course, I give the moment he drops it so that it's as light as possible, even though it's still there. But he knows that if he raises his pole like he just did there, that he will feel the contact. In my training with Art2Ride and with Karen, I have learned that it's important to keep the contact, get him to work hind to front, back to front, and create a pushing power from his hind legs up through his back into a long, low, and forward stretch that's what Karen calls locked in, meaning that it's consistent. On this particular day, Contigo was willing to stretch, tracking to the right quite quickly and have a decent amount of activity from behind and a decent amount of reach from behind. Tracking left, it was a lot more difficult. I do like how he is loose enough in his pole where his nose in that wave that he's producing, his nose is jetting out and poking out more rather than getting to a sort of a fixed curled position that he used to have in previous months. You can see right there, he continues to sort of allow it to bump forward. His nose continues to bump forward, I guess is the best way to say it. And that was all I wanted from him there. I liked how he warmed up over his back, tracking to the right there, knowing that I was going to go into a mounted session and that I wanted to lunge him to the left for this full training session review. I didn't want to lunge him for too long tracking to the right. So as soon as I got him stretching deeply with his nose near the ground, with his nose poking forward and an active hind leg reaching and underneath himself and pushing his back up, warming his back up, getting that swing. As soon as I got that, I gave him the reward of allowing him to stop. Now we're going to go ahead and work on the other direction, tracking left. So tracking to the left, I have a lot of challenges because of that left shoulder. And Contigo, his spine is curved to the right, so he has a vertical challenge in that he likes to drop in on that left shoulder because he's so crooked. Today actually was a little more challenging than most of my lunge sessions tracking left more recently. But I figured I'd just work through it and let you all see what transpires sometimes when he's resistant with me. We did get to a very nice place, and that's all that matters. The fact is that I continue to be persistent about asking him to use himself using the Art2Ride principles. And he did get there. Here I'm just adjusting the lead line. And then at the walk, I'm just asking him to move his haunches over for me. He tends to like to look out the circle and swing his haunches in on me when tracking left. So at the walk, I remind him to move his haunches over without rushing his rhythm, his steps. But that when I put the whip on him there, that just means please move over without rushing or running. When I track left with him on the lunge line, if I ask for too much forward too fast, his crookedness becomes exasperated by the speed, and he falls in on his left shoulder even more. You can see how it's medially rotated. It actually sort of almost steps his step, when he steps, his hoof actually seems like it lands one hoof step inside of what it should. So I'm actually trying to send him out on the circle, but I'm also actually trying to control his haunches a little bit. If I just open up the circle right away, he just keeps his haunches pointed in towards me. So I need to stay as close to him as possible, and I need to send his whole body out. My effort is to slightly bring his nose in without pulling him in on the shoulder. At the same time, a little bit of forward momentum helps him stay out on the circle rather than falling in. It has to do with tact and feel, and I feel it when I'm in there doing it. He actually does resist me quite a bit and pulls away from, sort of tries to look outside the circle when I actually try to supple him and bring his nose in on the circle. And he's not very responsive when I tap him with the whip to push his haunches out. And then he sort of throws a tantrum if he doesn't feel like he's being heard. And then he tries to canter, and I was surprised that he picked up the left lead. Usually he picks up the right lead. You're going to see him pick up the right lead quite a few times because he's so crooked this direction that it's hard for him to get the correct lead. But I also see there's a purpose to this, and that is just letting him warm up. So I've learned to be extremely patient with him when lunging to the left. And you can see right here that moment that he lowers his neck and trusts himself to have the balance that he needs when he does that. Is when I start to is the signal I need to know that he's starting to warm up and be ready for some of this work. On this particular day, he did resist a bit more than usual. You can see him picking up the right lead canter, What I didn't want was a bigger tantrum than what he's giving right now for this training video. And there are times that I will just bring his nose in on the circle, as I've been taught by Karen. And if he canters, he canters. If he trots, he trots. But to get a better, quicker response from him, unfortunately, sometimes those larger tantrums aren't very pretty. So what I'm trying to do is just keep things very diplomatic here and very positive. And so here I'm getting a lot more of what I really want. And this is where it starts to pay off more. He is swinging more. He's elongating his neck. That forward momentum is reaching under his body, pushing that neck out, the nose out. I do like how open his throat latch is. Months ago, it wasn't like this. It's been one of my primary goals, is to keep that throat latch open. Another goal is to not rush him too much, but to continually seek that activity, that willingness to be active, forward, deep reaching strides. Once again, I'm at this point, I'm seeing if I can get him to lock in to that deep, long, low, and forward stretch with this kind of activity. And he's partially committed, but partially not committed on this particular day. Here he's going to come up again, I think, and try to canter again. Somewhat resistant, obviously. And that's fine. I'm just not going to push it. Maybe he's sore somewhere. Maybe he's feeling tight somewhere. And I just need to support him, give him a chance to do it. The canter is something to the left that's been very, very difficult for him. And I'm actually pretty pleased overall that a couple times today he actually picked up the left lead. He actually did a flying change. He's using his body more to figure it all out. Karen has asked me when he does canter with the right lead to ask him to stop. So I do ask him to stop. Not stop, but she's asked me to bring him back from a canter. But the canter does help him get the energy he needs and the activity he needs in the trot, and it does improve the trot. This is not too bad. When I see him cantering like that and starting to get this swing that I like right there, I'm trying to just go with this flow. I have to stay as close to him as possible so that I can reach him and keep that contact to his mouth and gently supple him. Every time I'm trying to gently supple him, he's actually resisting a little bit. So it's very difficult for me on this particular day. A lot of times he's not quite this challenging, but today he was. On this particular day he was. We're going to be coming to the end of this lunge session very soon. I got some nice stretch work, active, engaged stretch work from him. That's starting to look better. So he pokes his nose out. To me, that's more meaningful than if he's curled and lower to the ground. I like to see him poking his nose out more than just lowering his neck with his nose on the ground and curled. So this to me is a vast improvement over where he's been in the past, and the way that he, of course, what happens in the front end is a reflection of what's happening in the hind end. And I do think that he's working quite well in the hind end there. He's got some nice impulsion happening there, some good bounce. Of course, he, from time to time, interrupts that by bringing his pole up, and the rhythm breaks. But overall, I felt that he did get there in a good enough way for me to quit this session and then move on to the mounted session. I think all I'm doing here is waiting for one more really good stretch before I ask him to come to a halt. And that was it right there. And that's it. And then we'll move on to the mounted session.